to make more of this than it deserves, but this is just in from the city manager's office and the chief of police's office in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where the president was involved in that town hall today. You saw somebody with bearing a firearm into that event today with a license. This is a separate story. The city of Portsmouth announcing the arrest of Mr. Richard Terry Young for carrying a loaded pistol without a license, also a misdemeanor offense at approximately 9:40 a.m. Eastern Time this morning. Mr. Young, it says, located inside of the high school where he was detained by the Secret Service, arrested by the police for that offense, carrying a pocket knife. A search of his vehicle, police in Portsmouth say, parked on school property, revealed a loaded gun. That is the mugshot of Richard Terry Young, arrested today. That is the basis for the second charge. In addition to those offenses, according to Portsmouth police, Richard Terry Young, is being investigated by the U.S. Secret Service for possible federal crimes resulting from the same series of events. Bail had not yet been set, and Mr. Young, according to the Portsmouth Police Department, remains in the custody in New Hampshire for apparently carrying a pocket knife into the senior high school in Portsmouth, New Hampshire at the time of the president's town hall today, and then having an unlicensed firearm in his vehicle as well. If there are further updates, obviously we will keep you posted on them. To this point, no one congratulates themselves on powers of perception when the sinking feeling that there is racism at some of these healthcare town halls proves true, when the suspicion is borne out by an obvious display of hatred, not to suggest that this was a case of that, an effigy or a sign with a racial slur. But on our fourth story in the countdown, it may not be the only motive, it may not be the predominant one, but it does exist. It can't be ignored. And it is an undercurrent that connects the irrational birthers to the equally irrational deathers, the crowd that believes there is an Obama death panel. Congressman David Scott, Democrat of Georgia, victim of it. At a recent town hall meeting, he dared to accuse disruptive participants of trying to hijack that gathering. Scott's district office in Smyrna, Georgia, has now been vandalized. A 4-foot swastika painted on the office sign overnight. That and what Michigan Congressman John Dingell has encountered at town halls has reminded Dingell of something from a very long time ago.
Well, the last time I had to confront something like this was when I voted for the Civil Rights Bill and my opponent voted against it. At that time, we had a lot of Ku Klux Klan folks and white supremacists and folks in white sheets and other things running around causing trouble.
But there's nothing more illustrative than an account sent to the Atlantic magazine from someone who had planned to be attending the town hall meeting of Democratic Congresswoman Kathy Castor and Betty Reed in Tampa. I was to attend the healthcare summit. I never made it into the building. Never experienced in my life really experienced outright racism in a public place. Signs of Obama hung in effigy, racial slurs on signs, people chanting negative words too many to list, and outright screaming at Obama supporters. The hatred was in their eyes, and they actually scared me for a moment. At first I was shocked, then a little scared, and then I got outright mad in the span of 1 minute. I actually left. Let's turn now to the Associate Professor of Politics and African American Studies at Princeton University, Melissa Harris Lacewell. Good evening, Professor.
Hi, nice to see you.
Again, this isn't everybody at these meetings. We have no idea to what degree that it is people, but they're there. And when racism becomes blatant and it's no longer even hidden behind euphemisms, how much greater is the danger, not just to the conversation, but to people's safety?
Well, certainly, I think the greatest danger to people's safety is people coming armed, obviously, to these meetings. And the biggest problem in terms of conversation is the shouting. And I think, you and I both know that talking about race and labeling individuals as racist is the fastest way to shut down a conversation about what's really going on around questions of race. And it shuts down quickly because people start saying, well, I'm not racist. I have black friends, or I've never used the N-word. So I think what we want to focus on here is exactly what Congressman Dingell was focusing on, which is the fact that these tactics and these strategies have been used by the same groups, these hate groups like the Ku Klux Klan, heck, even by Southern governments during the Civil Rights Movement, these same strategies of massive resistance against change. And so what we want to see is that these similar tactics have been used by those who were clearly racially biased.
To the congressman's remarks that invoked the debate in the 60s and the Klan specifically, doesn't racism in this country today, largely because of what we all went through in the 60s and the 70s in particular, and the 50s obviously, doesn't it have a built-in self-destructiveness, not to society, but to racists, to people who maintain that stance? Or is there still a reverse tipping point? Could it regain not just an influential foothold in this country, but a decisive one, a mainstream one? Is that still plausible?
I think there's no doubt that part of this sort of anxiety around taxes, around health care, around all of these sort of disparate issues that are coming together in this anxiety has to do with fear of an African-American president, a woman in the as Secretary of State, a Latina on the Supreme Court. If you can remember the final 4 contenders for the Democratic nomination, it's a white woman, a black man, a white Southerner, and a Latino. That kind of change in America produces a great deal of anxiety for people who are not quite sure that, governing amongst women and brown and black people constitutes real American governance. What I do think is the important or the good story here is that the Klan did, in fact, march against the civil rights movement in the 1960s. They did press back against civil rights legislation, and yet our Congress, our representatives, had the courage, the moral courage, as well as the democratic courage to push forward with those reforms because they were necessary. So we have to hope that this Congress will be similarly morally courageous.
Well, and to that point, there seems to be a strategy now for protecting the town halls from agitation that serves no purpose. Even health care reform itself might go through unscathed, but what happens to this hate that has been tapped into? Does it just move on organically to the next presidential initiative, or does it have to be prompted to move there by agitation, by media? Could it die between events, or is it with us?
I suspect it won't die. I suspect that if sort of agitation around race were going to simply, fall apart of its own accord or die, we would have seen that in, the 1870s or in the 1970s. I have a father who went to Jim Crow public schools, and from the time that I was a small child, he always signed my birthday cards, "The struggle continues." And so we are part of a continuing struggle, and we need not lose courage on that front.
Melissa Harris Lacewell of Princeton, as always, great thanks for your perspective on this stuff.
Thanks.